Alright, today we're going to do the unboxing of the breaker for the mini skid steer. This is model M-HMR. And again, this is for the mini skid steer. Okay, so we've opened it up, and inside the box you're going to find the breaker and the bracket that attaches to your mini skid. A set of hoses that have pre-installed quick connects on them. One Chinese nitrogen bottle, which is kind of useless here in the United States. Two breaker bits, and your toolbox, which will also include your charging head and the charging head and hose. Okay, so we'll go about installing the lines first, and then we'll put a charge in it and get it ready to go out. Okay, so the first step in putting your hoses on is to break these two ports out. They're 27 millimeter covers and 27 millimeter adapters. So we've already broken these loose and taken them out. And if you know, this is a British thread here, and this is a metric tin. So we'll go ahead and put the adapters that came with the hoses. We'll put those on there. We're going to take a little bit of hydraulic fluid, and we're going to put it on the O-rings so they're nice and lubricated, and then we'll attach the adapter. Okay, so we have the adapters off the end of the hose, and they're ready to go in. There's an O-ring there. We put a little hydraulic fluid on that to lube it up and wiped off the surface, so it's good to go. Okay, so the adapters have been installed and tightened onto the breaker head, and now we're going to install the hoses. This is a M16 DIN-like connection. That's a 19 millimeter nut there. We're just going to snug them up. There is an O-ring on the inside of the DIN connection that makes the seal, so you don't want to over crank it. All right, and that's that. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to use the Allen wrench that's included in the kit. Remove this port cover to the nitrogen charging port, and we'll put a charge in it. Okay, we're getting ready to charge the breaker up with nitrogen, and first we're going to talk a little bit about the Chinese nitrogen tank. It's a perfectly good tank for nitrogen if you're in China, but here in the US it lacks a DOT certification, so you will not be able to get it filled here in the US. So, wall decoration, boat anchor. Here we have a tank here. It's got the DOT stamp on it. This is a 580 nitrogen valve, very common in the United States. This is a spun aluminum. We also have it here in a steel tank, again with the 580 valve. And there's a couple of options here. One is getting an adapter, and you could screw that in there, and that's going to give you a 540N, so 580 to 540 adapter. You can get that at the welding house. But one of the things you think about, when this tank is filled, it's over 1,600 pounds of nitrogen. And your charging valve is just that, it's a charging valve, it's not a regulator. So if you hook it up direct here, and you plug that into there, and you crank this wide open, you can put 1,600 pounds of pressure into your breaker, which will damage the diaphragm. Right, so charging pressure on this is 217 pounds or 15 kPa. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this regulator to control the amount of pressure we're sending to the charging valve, and we're going to hook that valve up. One of the things you're going to notice about the valve that comes in the kit is I have modified this one with an L bracket here, because when they come from the factory, this valve or this gauge is mounted directly into the valve, and when that happens, it will not physically fit in this particular breaker configuration because the brackets are in the way. So by putting this 90-degree on here, we can now mount this up right into the breaker. Okay, so this is the charging head that comes in your kit. It's a 10mm thread, and you tighten it into the port by screwing this in here, and that tightens that up. And right here you got a bleed valve, so we can bleed any trapped air in there before we start to charge the nitrogen. And this is the nitrogen charging button itself. You can see you push that in, it's going to open the valve, charge the head, and you pull it back and you're good to go. One of the problems with the mini skid breaker is they didn't take into account the bracket configuration here that they built around the breaker head. And with this right out of the kit, it will not physically fit. You cannot get to the breaker port, the gauge gets in the way. So this charging head here has been modified with this 90-degree right here. And so that allows us to mount it into the breaker head here. That's been tightened up. And so now we're gonna go through the process of actually charging the valve. So, okay, so we're gonna go ahead and crank the tank open. And we've applied just a little bit of pressure to the system here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open the bleed valve and bleed out any air that was trapped in here, so it's just nitrogen, so that's now closed. Okay, and now we're going to use this to bring up the pressure to exactly 15 kPa or 217 pounds. We'll be looking at this gauge right here, looking for the needle to go to the top of the red. There we go. So we're now steady at the pressure we need to be. We go ahead and press this button right here. Allow that pressure to equalize. The head is now charged. I'm going to close the valve here. You'll see that as soon as I release this went ahead and popped back up. It's closed, so I'm just going to bleed off the pressure. Now, remove the charging head. Okay, so now the head's all charged, we're going to put the plug back in. This is the Allen wrench that comes in your kit. Again, it has an O-ring, so we're just going to snug it up. It doesn't have to be super tight. There you go, it's good to go. And that completes the charging of the breaker. And hoses are installed. This thing's ready to go to work.